I'm Anne-Marie Pearman, and I'm joined today by Chana Studley. Hannah had suffered with PTSD after 3 violent attacks in the UK. After that, she went on to have a successful career in Hollywood, earning an Academy Award and also experience with coaching for those 25 years. Then she graduated from the One Thought Institute, and after that, her chronic pain that she'd suffered after the PTSD and the violent attacks, she found that had gone. And as a result of that, she did 5 successful case studies, and she is, on the back of that, she's worked on a program called Painless. She's recently working with people with long COVID. She's a World Health Organization first responder, an international speaker and author, has a diploma in psychology, a certified life coach with 30 years experience. And she's a published author with 2 books, The Myth of Low Self-Esteem and Painless, and very well is going to be published later this year. Thanks for joining me, Hannah. I'm sorry, I'm just going to let 2 more people into the room.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. Thank you.
So I'm going to start by asking you how you came across the 3 principles. I know you graduated from the One Thought Institute. Had you come across the 3 principles prior to joining that, or was that just coincidental?
No, it's I kind of found the principles about, I don't know, a year or 2 years before that. Like you said in the introduction, I've been coaching people for a long time, like 30 years. Like I trained in college. I trained as a volunteer for Manchester Rape Crisis Centre back in the early 1980s. And we were trained to answer the hotline and go out and do calls and give, talks to lawyers and nurses and people like that. So I'd been coaching people for a long time and into various self-help techniques and whatever was, going in and out of fashion at the time. And I ended up living in Southern California because I was working in the film business, and there was plenty of opportunity to, do all kinds of things, personal transformational work. So I'd always been interested in that kind of thing. And when I came across the principles, I was into what's called the Enneagram. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's kind of like it's a personality testing kind of system, like Myers-Briggs. People may have heard of that one. And I thought, that was what had captured my attention at the moment. And then I was having coffee with an old friend, and she told me, she said that she'd been to this workshop, and she said, I think you'd really like it. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And she couldn't explain it. And I remember saying to her, well, how fabulous is it if you can't explain it? Right? And I have total sympathy for her now, because I know how hard it is to put into words sometimes. So she wrote Sydney Banks' Mind, Thought and Consciousness on a napkin and pushed it across the table towards me. I wish I'd kept it. I'd have it in a frame now if I still had it. And I came home and I sat on my computer and I looked up Sydney Banks and I found some YouTube videos and I fell in love. It was like I found a vocabulary for what I'd always suspected. Like I knew the problem was in my thinking, but I thought I had to do something about that thinking. So that's why I've been learning all these different techniques and methods for a couple of decades, learning how to keep my thought hygiene really good. Right. So negative thinking was clearly the problem. So I was very skilled, and I would share with my clients how to keep the negative thinking away, what to do with it if it's snuck in, and how to, keep as positive as possible. And so when I came across the 3 principles, and one of my first insights was seeing that thought is neutral and that you don't actually have to do anything. It's going to move on its own. I was like, what a relief, because all that hard work I was doing, excuse me, I think was contributing to keeping my chronic pain going. I was constantly keeping the nervous system revved up by all that busy work, and it really wasn't helping. So because I fell in love with this and it made so much sense to me, that's why I went to London. I live in Israel. I'm in Jerusalem right now. So I had to go to England to study with Aaron Turner, who's a brilliant teacher. And it was a 6-month course, and I had so many insights. It just kind of all these, puzzle pieces like fell into place whilst I was doing that course. And afterwards, it really gave me confidence to go out and share this with other people. So, I mean, that was about, what, 6-7 years ago now. So yeah, I loved it.
So it interests me about the fact that when you had your PTSD after those 3 violent attacks, how, I'm just trying to put myself in your situation. Did you ever I mean, obviously you're over it now, but when you're going through that, did you think, why me? Why has this happened to me 3 times?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first one was when my skull was fractured. I was in a nightclub. It was some guy, wanted to dance with me, smashed my head into a concrete pillar. It sounds so dramatic now, but at the time it was just like my girlfriend who was there, who went to the emergency room with me, she doesn't even remember. Like, we're still friends, thank God, 40 years later, and we joke about it sometimes. She doesn't even remember, because it was kind of I wouldn't say our lifestyle, but it was like we were punk rockers, and it was very much we were living on the edge. Well, we thought we were anyway, at the time, and so it was just, I didn't really acknowledge the first one really so much as it really was a sexual assault, and I didn't really acknowledge it that way. And then the second one, when the 3 men jumped me, and it was only 6 o'clock in the evening, but it was in Manchester, which is in the north of England, and it was already dark in February. I really thought I was going to die. They were beating on me. I had an out-of-body experience. Just, I could see them beating me. It was very bizarre, which I think is very common with traumatic situations. It's the way the brain tries to help us survive. It kind of removes you from the situation. But following that, I got very, very scared and anxious, and I could barely leave the house. Every time I'd go near the front door, it was like, last time you left the house, they almost killed you. 2 months ago, they almost killed you. And it just, I was reliving it. And why me was one of the questions that kept coming up a lot, because I'm tall. I'm almost 6 feet tall. So like, why'd they pick on me? I didn't have any money on me. I think that's why they were angry, and they were beating me, because they couldn't find anything. And so it was very confusing, because I know it wasn't personal, because they didn't know me. So why me? And then so when it happened the third time, which was a 16-year-old boy threw a bicycle at my head, I went down very fast after the third time, because I had evidence. If you'd said to me, oh, it'll be fine, let's just go for a walk in the park, I'm like, no, I've got an X-ray and police reports to prove, that it's not safe to leave the house. I was convinced that I would get hurt again. And it was, I didn't think of myself as paranoid. It was the truth, because I had evidence. So I was reliving it. And the only time I went for any professional help, my family doctor sent me to a psychiatrist at the local hospital, and she just wanted me to relive it in her office. And I remember thinking, well, I do that really well at home. I need you to show me how to not do that. And she didn't have anything to offer other than relive it so that I guess her theory was that if you say it enough times, you're gonna, flush it out of your system or something. I don't know what her thinking was, but that's her training. But it just made me keep reliving it every day for even longer. And thank God that that I finally saw through that was not the way out. In fact, that's the way of keeping it around. And I really think that's what kept my chronic pain going for such a long time, that reliving of it. Yeah.
And just coming across the 3 principles that helped you drop all that negative thinking then.
I'd done a lot of work before I came across the principles. I was doing pretty well for a good 10 years before I came across the principles. So I think the 3 principles just kind of was kind of like the final puzzle piece. I was doing a lot of meditation, and this is kind of before mindfulness, but I was doing meditation and journaling work and expressive writing and all that kind of stuff, lots of techniques to fix it. And what the principles showed me is that there was nothing to fix. I wasn't broken. There was nothing wrong. I just thought there was, and I'd been told that there was. So if you're told there's something wrong with you and you think there's something wrong with you, it would be irresponsible not to try and fix it. And I had that very much that perfectionist kind of personality that wants to overthinking everything. And that's why I was trying lots of techniques and methods to try and fix it, because I was miserable. So clearly something was wrong, right? But now I see it was an innocent misunderstanding was what was wrong, that was easily fixed, or easily, an insight, a couple of insights, and it just like it melted away, because it was only made of thought in the first place.
And I understand now you've started working with people with long COVID. Would you like to talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So following one thought, I started working with people with chronic pain because my pain had gone away. And that's really what I've been doing for the last, I don't know, was it 4 or 5 years now, which has been an amazing experience. And then I guess about 3 months ago, a businessman in the UK contacted me. He'd read my book because he'd read Joe Bailey's book, Dr. Joe Bailey. If audience is familiar with that, Dr. Joe Bailey wrote a book this year called Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane. And it's full of examples, people's stories who are going through a really tough time, and stories of hope. And so he very kindly put my story in his book. And Marcus, the guy with long COVID, he'd read that, he saw my story, he bought my book, and then he contacted me. And he said, I've been suffering with long COVID for 2 years. He was one of the first people to contract COVID back in the beginning in the UK. And he'd been very, very sick with it. I have a video of him talking about it. I remember him telling me a story that he called the paramedics at one point, well, several times, I think, but at one point, and they said to him, "Can you go to a mirror?" So he crawls to a mirror, and they said, "Are your lips turning blue?" And he's like, "No." They said, "Well, we're not coming. Like we're so overwhelmed right now. We can only deal with people who are dying." And he was close to it. He wasn't quite there. So he stayed home, and his wife took care of him, and then she got corona. But after the initial symptoms of the virus had gone, he was left with the classic case of fatigue and brain fog, and terrible headaches, and for 2 years he barely left his house. He couldn't play with his 7-year-old son. He hadn't driven his car. He owns his own business. He has 50 employees working for them. He couldn't even sit through a whole Zoom meeting for his business. He was pretty much absent from his business for a couple of years, and he was miserable. He'd become like a vegetable. And so it sounds extreme, but we had one session and he started getting better. And admittedly, he did know about the 3 principles before. He'd had Michael Neal, who's a great principles teacher. He'd had Michael Neal come and do some sessions with the people in his office, but he'd never made the connection between the principles and his physical condition. So we talked about it, and I shared with him the insights I'd gotten from working with people with chronic pain, and he started getting better. And then I have a mentoring program. I mentor people via WhatsApp. It's like a monthly fee, and people can message me as much as they need, like 6 days a week. So he opted for that, and I would just message him, and I would check in with him, or he would check in with me, and he'd say things like, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit COVID-y today." Like he invented a word, right? I was like, "Are you feeling COVID-y today?" Right? And what he started seeing was his COVID symptoms, his long COVID symptoms, were connected to his state of mind. And so when he was feeling in a bit of a better mood, his headache would go away. He'd get more energy, and he was able to do stuff. And within a first month, he was playing with his kid. He took a few turns at doing carpool and driving his kid to school. He was taking long walks, and he was able to do Zoom meetings. And then I remember the first day that he went into the office again. 2 years he hadn't been in the office. And I remember him saying to me, like, "I was going to tell you this is a big day. I'm going into the office." And then he said, "Why am I making it into a big day? That's the kind of thing I used to do. That's going to make my nervous system get all upset again." So he just went in, and he sent me a photograph of him sitting at lunch, eating his lunch at a local cafe near his office. And it was like, yes. And he described himself as a man freed from prison. I mean, that's really what he felt like. And since then, he's just been gradually getting better and better. He's back to work pretty much full time now. He's a full-time parent again. He's, enjoying nature. He's thinking about selling his business and doing something completely different. He's like, talk about poster child, And so it really got me interested in this, because like he told me that something like 55, I don't know, I can't remember the numbers now, but there was like so many people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people suffering, with long COVID, just in the UK itself. So I actually joined a Facebook group for long COVID sufferers just because I was curious. And what I noticed was a lot of the symptoms like he had, like, the fatigue and the insomnia and the headaches and the brain fog were very familiar. Like all the symptoms I was reading for other people with long COVID were very similar to what my clients have with chronic pain. And my new book that's coming out hopefully at the end of the summer, which is about hormones, women who are suffering with hormones, they're pretty much having the same symptoms too, which are, they're all stress related. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't definite symptoms of long COVID in terms of, some people have had real damage in their lungs and some other organs, but worrying about it, the anxiety, that's contributing to then the stress related symptoms like insomnia and stomach problems and even itchy skin or migraines. Some of the symptoms seem quite random, but over and over again I kept seeing people posting that they'd had tests and the tests came back normal, and the doctors are frustrated because they don't know why these people are sick. And I'm like, I could give you a good suggestion. They've fought themselves into a panic, and like me with my back pain and all the physical things I had wrong, our bodies are screaming at us, that we're thinking ourselves into a stressed out mess, that we're going too fast, that we need to slow down. And that's one of the things that I kind of learned from talking to Marcus, this idea that there's an outer speed and then we have an inner speed. And it's one thing if you're resting because you're sick, but if your mind's still going 100 miles an hour, watching the news, scaring yourself, Googling at 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to work out what's wrong with me, that inner speed is what is keeping the nervous system revved up and sending danger messages to the brain. And then the brain is producing all these physical symptoms as a result. So that's kind of where I got to with it. And I'm beginning to help a few other people. And it's really amazing to see the change in people when they have a few insights into what's actually causing their current symptoms. Mm-hmm.
And I was watching a webinar you did that's currently on YouTube, and you had people talking about fibromyalgia, and I've got a relative with fibromyalgia, but also something I hadn't heard before, which was, I'm probably going to get this wrong, is it sore mouth syndrome or something?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, those are just two of the symptoms that the many symptoms that people can get. There seems to be an endless list of stress related illnesses. In fact, long before COVID came to our shores and anybody knew that word, I was actually, talking to my family doctor, and I was telling her about the work I was doing with people with chronic pain. And I remember she pointed at the door of her surgery and she said, everybody who comes through my door is either maternity or some kind of stress related illness. And she called it the epidemic of the age. And obviously this is before COVID. But her point was that like nearly everybody she sees these days, you could probably trace what they're experiencing back to stress, prolonged stressful thinking. And then, so when you're living in the feeling of prolonged stressful thinking, it can show up as fibromyalgia, as burning mouth syndrome, psoriasis and eczema, asthma, allergies, migraines, hair loss, fatigue, brain fog, air hunger, You know, I'm not a medical person, but I've been learning all these things. You know, I had terrible back pain, I had back spasms, I had sciatica, IBS. You know, it goes on and on and on. And at the bottom of all of these physiological things, if you ask the person enough questions, you start seeing that they are sitting in prolonged stress all day long. I've got a client right now with what's called hyperacusis. Hyperacusis is a very high sensitivity to sound. And she is in so much pain from sound, she can't even have the air conditioning on without having ear defenders on. You know, like this, like if someone's jackhammering the road, you know, they have these ear mufflers on. She has to have those on for the air conditioning. And she lives in Southern California. So she is basically lying in bed all day long in a darkened room. And that's her life. In fact, I've actually lost touch with her right now because we couldn't Zoom and we couldn't do phone calls. So how was I going to help her? So I was having to text. And because her eyesight is now affected as well, I could only text like 3 words, and I had to space down 3 spaces and type 3 words. Trying to coach someone with 3 words, space, 3 words. And we did it for a few days and she started getting better. And then she had a relapse with her vision, and I haven't heard from her in a week and a half now. So I hope she's okay. You know, I hope she can recover enough that we can communicate again. It's heartbreaking when you really start hearing about the suffering that people are going through. And it's so innocent. So like you said, it's such an innocent misunderstanding of what's actually happening.
I'm thinking about my relative who's got fibromyalgia. She can't cry. She can't physically cry. And I'm convinced that's part of the reason she has fibromyalgia, because she can't actually let it out because she has this inability to cry. I don't know that you've come across anybody else who can't cry. She's the only person I know who's like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's connected because, I mean, in the traditional pain management world, they talk about repressed rage and suppressed emotions and people not feeling their feelings. And I believe there's something to that, in that, I mean, I know I was brought up in a home where you don't get angry, and you don't, you know, you just like stiff upper lip kind of, you know, like very English. But from an understanding the principles, this idea that it's stuck somewhere, you know, that there's a belief that, you know, trauma is stuck in the body, and you know, emotions are suppressed. That doesn't really make sense when you really understand the principles in terms of how thought really works. Because if thought is always moving, you know, thought is a creative energy, it can't actually get stuck. It just feels like it does, and that feeling is a clue to me. I have no business listening to that thinking, because it's probably quite unreliable, you know. And I can tell now if I'm heading into a low mood, because I'll hear language like, nobody understands, this is never going to change, it's always going to be like this, you know, that very kind of black and white thinking. I mean, I used to live like that, you know, for years I lived like that when I was suffering my PTSD. Nobody understands, it's always going to be like this, you know. And it's not true. But before, I didn't know that I didn't have to listen to that. So I would listen to it all day long. And now, even these days, if I get a funky thought, you know, I can get a funky thought, I can get an inappropriate thought, you know, a criminal thought. And it's such freedom to know that you don't have to listen to it. And therefore, because I don't take it seriously, then it doesn't affect my nervous system. And I've been, you know, pain-free pretty much for 6 years. I'm just getting over a cold right now. That's why my sinuses are a bit blocked up. But even my allergies have gone away, which have been horrendous ever since I was a little girl. So it's such freedom to not be stuck in that belief system, and my body's not screaming at me anymore.
Sorry, something else came to mind. It went into my head, then it's gone out again.
Don't worry, it happens to me all the time.
It was to do with something else you were talking about that I saw recently, and it's totally gone out of my head. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If I start stressing about thinking about it, it won't come back anywhere, will it?
Yeah.
So
It'll
come. While I'm trying to work out what I was going to say, has anybody got any questions or comments for Hannah? You can put your hand up or unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi.
I had support from Hannah, and what I loved about it, I guess she said, become a good listener. It was like magic. Her sentences were short. I'm still amazed by it, but this practicing not listening to our thoughts is a practice, and that's about. And sometimes I get discouraged. But yesterday I had an experience of going down the hill in my scooter to the pool. And like maybe 2 months ago, I thought, well, how do I get down there? And I think I was suffering from fatigue because yesterday it was just like go down there, go in, come out, get on the little bus. And I thought, well, that's peculiar. But all I can think of is that I was suffering fatigue over the winter. So my processing of how to do it would go on, and I wouldn't get a solution through my thinking. And then I'd get more tired. So that's all. It's just a little inkling that happened yesterday. And I thought, but it's so easy. So, it's like little blinks, I think, that we get. But Hannah is very good if you speak with her or somehow she woke, just help. I did listen to Sydney Banks years ago, and she asked me the question, well, what was it you got from listening to him? Something about, well, I relaxed. But I had to keep listening to him at the time. So now I'm back listening. But to me, it's like, but listening is important. And she's a very good listener. I'll just say that. And that's like, well, I think yesterday I had a little bit of better listening because I was with a group of people and they got into serious conversations about homelessness and this. And I thought, oh, if they only would know about, what can we all do as people to help the mental? But they were going in their old stories, and I got really bored. But I sat and I started to just listen to them. Then afterwards, I had another conversation with a lady who does listen. And so we done really well. But I think it was good that I shut my own mind off to what they were doing. That's a learning, mind my own business. Just that's who they are. And maybe as I'm a better listener with them, who knows? They might get new thoughts. Like they weren't into new thoughts. It was just old traveling scripts. And I thought, I don't have to be bothered by that. But I found someone afterwards who we listen well. And it's because that was kind of, because I'm out in conversations more than I used to be. But it can be a little tricky being in conversations with people. You can get sort of pulled in and yanked in. And Hannah doesn't do that. So thanks, Hannah. I'm still puzzled by how you just didn't go there. And it helped me wake up in my own health. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Yeah. See, to me, that's the 3 principles in action. When you suddenly realize something has shifted or changed, and we haven't really worked on it, because there's nothing to work on because it was only made of thought in the first place. And it's funny. I was sharing with someone earlier. Working with a teenage boy in Holland, Amsterdam, and he's really struggling like a lot of teenagers are right now. And I was telling him the story that's at the beginning of my first book about how when I was little, I was only, like 6 or 7 years old. And it was the first day of school, but it was also the first day of the school. The school was a new building. So everybody was, there was a big mess that nobody knew where they were going. And 300 kids sitting on the floor of the auditorium, and the teachers are reading off registers like, you go here, you go there, you go there. And like when you're the last to be picked for the team, right? That's what it felt like. Only there were 300 kids and I was one of the last to be picked for the team. And I remember in my little 7-year-old brain, they don't like me, they've forgotten about me. Maybe they said my name and I didn't hear it. Maybe I should say something. No, don't do that, because then they'll laugh at you if you make a mistake. Having this horrible little panicky nightmare in my little, brain. And then finally they called my name and I didn't even hear them because I was so up in my thinking. I couldn't hear the teacher call my name. So now they're shouting at me, like, why are they shouting at me? And I'm like, hey, everybody, I want to go home. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s and I was telling someone this terrible story about, my this poor memory I had, when I realized it was alphabetical. My last name begins with S. So in 1972 or whatever it was, probably before that, 1970, there weren't many kids in England with names that began with X, Y, and W and Z. Right? So because I'm an S, I was right at the end. And there was, for 25 years, had been telling this story of like, oh, poor me, I was left behind and this poor little panic attack in this. And then I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, it was alphabetical. It was nothing to do with, they didn't forget about me. And that shift, all I had to do was see it differently. And it shifted. And in fact, I remember laughing my head off when I realized it was alphabetical. That's the power of insight. When you see it differently, when then you feel different, and nothing out here has to change. All that changed was my perception. And that can happen all the time. So like what you were just sharing with conversations with people, yeah, you can easily get sucked into the politics or the gossip or the negativity. But if I can zoom out and just be an observer of it and see that, it's always passing by, it's always moving, and I don't have to get involved. I don't have to listen to it. In fact, most of my thinking is quite unreliable. I've learned to not tune out most of it. Then I get to live in freedom, and that's the brilliant thing about this. Like all those techniques and methods I used to know and use and share with my clients, just they're not needed. They're useless now. They're based on a misunderstanding that there's nothing actually to do. And you can enjoy so much more freedom. And I think that's why all the physical stuff got better, because I wasn't anxiously analyzing and overthinking everything all the time. So then my nervous system calmed down. Yeah.
Remembered what I was going to ask. It was.
That's how it works.
That's how it works. I know. Somebody on the same webinar, I think, was talking about meditation and how important it is to meditate. And you quoted back something Sydney Banks said about meditation. I can sort of remember it, but would you like to talk about that a bit?
Sure. Yeah. The quote, I'm sure the quote that I used was, Sid once said, "Don't confuse the act of meditation with the state of meditation." And because, like I said, in the pain management world, there's a lot of emphasis on mindfulness and meditation, and which is certainly much better than toxic drugs and surgery, which don't often work. So directing people to more spiritual practices is definitely an improvement. And I'm always keen to say that if someone has found something that works for them, that's fantastic. We don't want anybody to be suffering. We don't want people to be in pain. So if meditation or writing or mindfulness, whatever your practice is, if that's helping you, that's great. But I always encourage people to get curious and go a little bit further upstream and maybe get curious about how it's working. Why is it working? Why has it stopped working? And when you get further upstream and you start understanding how it works, then you start seeing that you can be in a state of meditation without all that effort. Because when you start looking at consciousness, which is one of the 3 principles, in a better state of mind, which is the same as saying better state of consciousness, I think those kind of words are interchangeable. In a better state of mind, I'm not going to need to do all that busy work to fix myself because I feel good, right? It's like, have you ever heard someone in a good mood say they need to work on their low self-esteem? They need to work on any self-esteem because you're feeling good, right? So I think, like, if you think of consciousness like as a higher state of mind, that's where, when we're who we really are, and we're naturally peaceful and calm, we're naturally more forgiving and grateful and open and flexible and, you know, easygoing and open-minded, and, you know, all those beautiful things that a human being, a human heart can just does naturally when we feel in a really good place. Like, you don't need a workshop on how to open up your heart when you're in a good mood, right? Your heart is open. That is you. That's who we are. It's only when we get lower down in a lower state of mind, a low mood, that we then need all those techniques and methods, because from a low mood, it looks like there's something wrong, so we better fix it, you know? And that's where we then, I had this insight when last year, I have a few book clubs going on my book, and there was a lady there, and she was telling me a story about difficulty with a family member, and she said, you know, I'm really having to work. She said, before I could forgive him really easily, and now this time I'm really have to work at forgiveness. And I thought, that's interesting. We talked about why before it was easy to forgive, because in a better state of mind, it's not even forgiveness. It's like it didn't happen. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but you know what I mean? It's like we're much more, we're not as reactive, you know, or sensitive. But in a low mood, that's when I have to work at forgiveness. I have to work at gratitude, you know, because it doesn't, down a low mood, it doesn't really exist. It's we're in the basement and we can't see. We've forgotten what the blue sky looks like, so we have to work at it, you know. So I know that if I'm having to work at something, it's probably I got caught up in my thinking. That's all that I need to know. So yeah, I think that's what Sid meant by, you know, don't confuse the act of meditation with the state of meditation, is because you can be in a state of meditation without all that hard work when you're just not caught up in your thinking. Because really, that's what I'm sure that's all the I know when I was doing a lot of meditation in California, that's what I really wanted. I wanted to be free of all that contaminated personal thinking. And now I get to be like that, and I don't have to spend hours a day, trying to make it happen. It just takes a few insights. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't say if something works for them to stop doing it, just for people to do what works for them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have any right or business telling anybody that they should or shouldn't do something. But what I found is when people get some really profound insights in that, they see for themselves that they don't need to do it. Like I've worked pretty closely with Dr. Bill Pettit, and I remember him saying, one time that it's not his job to tell people not to take medication. He's a physician, but he said, my job is to direct them to their own well-being so that they will know the right time for themselves that they don't need it anymore. And I've kind of seen that with techniques and methods. A lot of people I work with, they'll arrive with a whole, toolbox of, EFT, tapping and mindfulness and meditation and Reiki and NLP and DBT and EMDR, and it goes on and on and on. And I'm not, like I said, if that's working for them, that's fantastic. But what I found is when they start having insights into what we're pointing to, the need for that starts to drop away. I have a client right now, and he was on 14 different medications when we started working, and he's pretty much off of them all now. And it's not that he's completely pain-free, but he's seen that whatever he is dealing with, he's able to deal with it much better. And because the symptoms are calming down, he'd rather trust his body to take care of it and heal himself than numbing it out or putting a band-aid, a plaster on it. And so in a better state of mind, you don't feel the pain so intensely, and you have a much more in touch with your resilience that is there to guide you and help you. Yeah.
I was just thinking on a smaller scale, I can think of examples where I've been feeling ill and not wanted to attend a meeting, for example, but once I've got into the meeting and I'm involved and present at the meeting, I'm no longer feeling about being ill. I've forgotten I'm ill.
Right, yes.
It doesn't exist
Yeah.
anymore. A lot of time doesn't exist.
Right, because I remember when I first started reading all my pain research, one of the first things I read was from an Australian doctor called Lorimer Moseley, who's a very brilliant. He started out as a physiotherapist, I think. He did a stint at Oxford as in the neurology department. But one of the first things I heard him say was, "We only experience pain when it comes into consciousness." You know, and that struck me on several levels. Consciousness is like one of the three principles, so that was like a buzzword that kind of got my attention. But think about that. It's exactly what you just said. It's like, if it's not in my consciousness, then I'm not going to be feeling it. I'm not going to be aware of it. So the example I always use is like, if you were home with the flu or COVID, or if you're homesick and you go into the kitchen to make yourself a hot drink and you stub your toe on the kitchen table, you're like, damn it, who put that there? It's like, right? And you're probably hopping around and your toe is gonna hurt like crazy. But if you were going to the front door to, welcome your friends in with pizza and they're gonna watch a video, you might, and you stub your toe, you'd still feel it, but you'd probably forget about it pretty quickly because your friends are over and you can have a good time, right? So same tissue damage, but it's not in your consciousness. So, and there's tons of science to back this up. People like soldiers getting bullet wounds who don't feel it, because in the heat of the battle, or it wouldn't be useful for the brain to produce pain in a situation like that, because to stop, when you're in combat could be fatal. So, in situations like that, people often don't feel any pain until they get to somewhere safe, and then it'll hurt like crazy. Or you could have a paper cut that kills, like stings for hours, like, I have a cat, and when I got him when he was a tiny kitten, and I was covered in scratches all the time when he was baby, he'd treat me like a tree and like climb all over me, and like these little scratches would sting like crazy. And yet I was walking around with a broken neck for 2 years and didn't know it. So I learned that pain is not a reliable indicator of what's happening in your body.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's so, which I found is very useful information, because we think like, if you feel pain, it must be something wrong. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't anything wrong, but for sure get it checked out by a doctor. But you can't see pain on an X-ray, for example. And people often have pain, and what you find on the X-ray doesn't explain what the pain is doing. So it's I find it fascinating, because pain itself has no substance. It's created by the brain, and it's a signal to keep us safe. Only when we live in too much stress and anxiety, it starts to malfunction, and it's not serving the purpose it was intended for. Yeah.
There's been a comment, I don't know if you've seen it, which is sort of a question as well, which says, for example, if someone has a neurological illness and they don't want to take the meds, do you think the body can heal itself totally, or just that it stops prioritizing it?
I'm not a doctor, so I think that question's a little bit above my pay grade. I don't really know how to answer that. Yeah, I apologize. I think it's complicated. I mean, if the person's here wants to like break it down and ask it in a more simple way, I might be able to answer, but I think it's you'd have to repeat that question like 5 times for me to kind of even try to answer it, so I'm not going to try. But I'm happy if they want to discuss it.
Do you want to?
Okay, so hi Chana, I'm Georgia.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello, sweetheart, nice to meet you. Someone who is very close to me has MS, and it was fascinating to see that, I would say, their body totally mimicked how their emotional state was in life, from the point of view they were numb from head to toe, but in excruciating pain.
Mm-hmm.
But this actually, that's how life looked and how they wanted to respond to it. But there is the MS that has been diagnosed. So you can see stuff on a scan. But I also saw a miracle of when they looked at where they were looking at life, that within 3 days they were off every pain medication, and in 5 days off every sleeping tablet. So I watched a miracle occur when they went, oh shit, I'm just always looking at that. And they never wanted to take the pain medication. And interestingly enough, nothing has got worse since 2017, which is where they had that realization and their body started to recover. But obviously the damage is there. And I see when they get stressed, when they get caught up in their thoughts, the symptoms come back, even if nothing's got worse. But I guess the question is, behind that, the body is just responding to thought, to the energy of thought.
Yeah.
Is it possible that actually we can just heal ourselves if we harness that actually?
Two things come to my mind. One is the client I have with long COVID. He is very clear that his physical state is so connected to his state of mind. You know, when he's rushing around or he does too much, which might not be like he told me that he was probably close to burnout before COVID happened. So he was already that kind of personality of pushing, going, not feeling, you know, just like ignoring his health and just, you know, being the kind of businessman who just, you know, working all the hours. And so he was kind of primed for, you know, catching, you know, being, I've noticed that a lot of people with long COVID have that kind of personality. And it's kind of not surprising to me because it's very similar to the chronic pain people that I've been working with for years. So yeah, he's so aware now that his state of mind and his physical condition are so related, which is brilliant because then he knows that when he starts feeling a little bit COVID-y, he's like, oh yeah, I had a lot of expectations about today, or you know, I'm just packing too much into my day, and he stops and he slows down. And he's learned how to take care of himself, and then the symptoms go away, and he's doing great again. And now, of course, I've forgotten what the other thing I was going to say. What did you say at the end? You said, it's happened to me now.
if you can harness.
Harness, right.
Yeah.
So the thing about that is, from an understanding of the principles, I'd be cautious or careful not to be turning this into some kind of technique, because what came into my mind was I was talking to a guy in New York, and he was new to the principles. He was new to this idea of connecting it with physical stuff. And in the first conversation we had, in the first 10 minutes, I would say he repeated 100% pain-free over and over again. He kept saying to me, can you promise me I'm going to be 100% pain-free? When am I going to be 100% pain-free? Is it, you know, when's it going to happen? When did it happen for you? And I was like, and I had to kind of stop the kind of coaching session. And I said to him, look, stop. This is way too much pressure. I said, I'm feeling the pressure now. I can't imagine what it's like in your head. So I suggested to him, I said, for sure, I want you to get pain relief. And God willing, that's going to happen. I said, but we're going to take that very pressurized thought, put it on the shelf, and we'll come back to it. And so we just, chatted for an hour and did the whole coaching thing. And then at the end of the session, I kind of just checked in with him and I said, how are you feeling? And he said, you remember at the beginning when you said to me, let's put that thought on the shelf? He said, that blew my mind. He said, it never occurred to me. This is a guy in his 40s. He said, it never occurred to me if you had a thought, you didn't have to keep thinking it.
Yeah.
Right. So I said to him, you mean I didn't need to waste my time for the last hour? And he said, no, because I was then able to hear what you were saying. Right. And the pressure started to leave. So harnessing it, yes, but in a very hands-off kind of way. Like I was saying to I think it was Monica, about how the principles in action is when we usually let go. Because I think that's why when harnessing made me feel a little bit like it reminded me of the old days of me like pushing and striving and working and like, okay, I've done my meditation, now I've got to do my writing, and I've got to get this recovery thing going, and heal myself. God damn it,
Actually, what comes to mind is, of course, actually what I'm talking about is upstream, is actually harnessing the energy of life that we are and using that to heal the body, as opposed to harnessing the thought of healing.
Right.
It's so I think I wasn't clear actually as to how I said that. So no.
Right. Yeah, I just see it as when, like, one of the big blessings I've experienced is that I've lost interest in so much of my own thinking. And so I don't even pay that much attention to physical. I mean, I eat as healthy as I can and I exercise and, and I take care of myself that way, which in a better state of mind is just natural. And some days I'm more interested in it than other days because I'm a human being. Like I was going to go for a walk this evening before this podcast and I thought, no, I don't want to. All day long, I'm going to go for a walk tonight, and then it doesn't happen, But then the other day, I was walking all day long. So I feel more, the more I feel so much more relaxed about it. And I think that is healing my nervous system.
Yeah.
That is what's healing my nervous system is relaxing about it, not the pushing or the having an agenda or expectations and things like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I noticed that there was the lady with the or someone with a butterfly had their hand up a couple of times. I can't.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Xander, did you have your
Wendy
hand?
just had her hand up.
Yeah, and I just noticed Wendy's, but I didn't notice Xander's. But Wendy just
No, it was just a thumbs up or some other reaction.
Okay, thank you.
I think Wendy wanted to ask something, so let her go.
Yeah. Hi, Hannah. How are you?
Hi, Wendy.
Hi there. Something that occurs to me as we're talking, I've been a nurse for a million years, and I happen to be a nurse that works with people in chronic pain. And I've been known to have my own pain situations before, illnesses and so forth. And I'm 63 years old. So all that tells me, I know for a fact that there are things going on in my body right now that I'm unaware of, that have not been diagnosed or labeled. So I'm not paying attention to them right now. But there are things that are probably not going the right way, like maybe my digestion is off and it's going to result in something happening tomorrow. Or my point being that when we focus on things, that thinking can rev up. But the body and the mind and the heart of human beings is geared toward wellness and innate health all the time. And for the most part of my life, literally, I've not been somebody that's had a lot of illnesses, but I think there are men, I talk to people all day that say, oh, I have this pain condition. I am a blah, blah, blah patient. And that may be very well true, but they're also a wife and a mother and a basketball player and a crocheter. So I find it interesting that there are times and seasons when we are looking at something, focusing on something, staring at something, and how of course it has to loom large, but there's so many other things that are occurring in a 360 view of humanity, and my body is doing a great job taking care of those things. Like whatever that digestive thing that's happening, it's going to show up tomorrow. My body's fighting it. Maybe it's not going to be as bad tomorrow because today my body's taking care of it. So there's just something that's kind of emerging or bubbling up about the amazing way that we take care of ourselves anyway, all the time.
Yeah, it's that intelligence of the body is, to fix itself. Like, I remember when I was writing my book, and I got this little gem from somewhere, I can't remember where from now, but like if you fracture your arm and they put a cast on it, the cast has no healing properties at all, right? The cast is just keeping the bones still so that they can mend themselves. The mending happens inside the body. The cast is actually, it's there for like security, but it doesn't have any healing qualities. So the body is, and this is something else, an insight I got when I was writing was that like we often talk about the intelligence of the body and how amazing that it is to to heal itself. Then the creative intelligence that designed that also created our minds. So if we were created with an incredible repair and healing system in the body, why wouldn't the mind also have a healing and repair system, right? So, it always fascinates me when people would talk about like the amazing intelligence of the body to heal itself, but now we had to fix our thinking, that our minds are broken and we have to, dig in there and get all that repressed rage out and stuff like that. I'm like, hold on a minute, the mind also has a way to repair itself, which is why the snow globe is such a great example of that. I always say to people like, shaking it up and like, so what did I have to do to stop it from like swirling around anymore? And they go, nothing. Exactly. Right? That our minds, if we leave it alone, if you just leave it alone, it will pass, it will settle, it will clear. And then there's clarity where we'll then get room for inspiration and ideas, and that idea might be like, go to the doctor. Like, I'm actually going to go to the doctor tomorrow morning because I've had this sinus infection for like 2 or 3 weeks now. It's like, enough already. I'm losing my taste buds because I've been like breathing through my mouth the whole time. So I thought, I tried it, like I kind of grew up in a house where my mother was a nurse also, and so you only went to the emergency room if you were dying. So I'm getting better now. I'll go to the doctor. Finally, I'm allowed. It's okay. That's my wisdom is telling me to do that tomorrow. So it's an incredible health and mind body. The mind body connection is fascinating.
Thank you.
Got 1 minute left, so if anybody's got a quick question or comment, or has it just turned 9 or 8 my time? I think it's probably 10 your time, Hannah.
Yeah.
If not, it's at the top of the hour, and I'll say thank you, Hannah, for your time.
My pleasure. It was so nice to meet you.
Thanks for everybody else for coming. And this will be going on YouTube on the 25th of May, premiering 7 p.m. UK time. And I chose the 25th of May. Well, I always remember the anniversary of Sydney Banks' passing because it's happens to coincide with my birthday. So
Oh.
that's why it's on the 12th of May.
Well, I hope I'll see some of you in London at the UK conference as well. If they're, please come and say hello. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye.